All right, everybody, welcome in to Diddy or Didn't He with me, Pugs Moran, here on the Radio Misfits, radiomisfits.com podcast platform. It is day 30, trial day 30 of the Diddy or Didn't He case there in a federal courthouse in Manhattan. It's a big day today, day 30, nice round number. I like that. Closing arguments began. It has been 6 weeks of every night you and I gathering here and talking about all the dirty little Diddy details that we got from this case, all of the humiliations of this man, all of the gross details of what these people live like. Oh, it's been fun, hasn't it? Well, that's all done. Now for the next 2 days, we're going to have the defense and the prosecution explaining exactly what it is that we all just experienced the past 6 weeks. They're going to nutshell it for us. By the way, I do need to apologize. There may be a situation here during our recording of Diddy or Didn't He tonight where we're interrupted, I should say, by some text messages. I am, as I start to record here, I'm in a fierce debate with my 16-year-old son about who would win in a fight, the Liver King or Joe Rogan. Yeah, these are the topics that you find yourself engaging in when you have a modern 16-year-old child. So please, just a little fair warning, should you hear my phone go off, that's the important issues being discussed via text between me and my son. All right, let's get started. First, I need to bring you up to speed. We did not do an episode yesterday. Court was dark yesterday. It was private day for the attorneys and the judge to kind of figure out how they're going to move forward here and how closing arguments will be handled. So nothing to report from yesterday as far as that stuff, but there was one big piece of news that came out. Maybe you heard it, and I want to discuss this just a little bit here in the beginning. Because there was a lot of misinformation going around on the interwebs as this story broke yesterday. The story that came out yesterday was that the prosecution had decided to sort of trim down the case that they would be presenting to the jury. Here, I'll read it to you. It says here, yesterday, the prosecution said the theories of attempted kidnapping, attempted arson, and aiding and abetting sex trafficking will no longer be pursued. Okay, so how that manifested online yesterday around 2 o'clock in the afternoon is that millions of people started tweeting shit like charges against Diddy were dropped. No, they weren't. This is actually a fairly standard thing that happens in these kinds of cases. Here's what the government had to say yesterday about them dropping these charges. The government understands the court's desire for streamlined jury instructions. With that in mind, the government has suggested ways to streamline those instructions. The prosecution's move comes as the government works to simplify the charges against Diddy for the jury. Former federal prosecutor Nima Rahimi explains. Okay, so here's what a prosecutor says about that. Okay, because we're not lawyers, right? Here's what a real lawyer said about the prosecution getting rid of the theories of attempted kidnapping, attempted arson, and aiding and abetting sex trafficking. All right, this attorney says there are no charges being dropped. The prosecution's legal theories are the same. The government is no longer pursuing the attempted kidnapping and attempted arson as predicate acts for racketeering. But they can still... Sorry, I just lost my spot. I'm reading my notes here. All right, so you understand, like, they didn't drop charges. They just trimmed down the extensive charges that already existed, right? All right, so it goes on to say here again, this is... what attorney is this? I can't remember this attorney's name. There are no charges being dropped. The prosecution's legal theories are the same. The government is no longer pursuing attempted kidnapping, attempted arson, and as predicate acts for racketeering. They can still argue that the completed kidnapping of Cassie Ventura and of Capricorn Clark. Wow, we're going back far with Cassie. I don't even remember the details of the so-called Cassie kidnapping. I'm sorry. But as far as Capricorn Clark goes, this one I do remember because I do remember making a note at the time that, That could be ugly come jury time. Capricorn Clark testified about 3 weeks ago. She was one of Diddy's assistants. She was the assistant at the time of the Kid Cudi incident. If you remember, Kid Cudi had struck up a relationship with Cassie. Cassie and Diddy were supposedly on a break, but Diddy didn't appreciate Cassie running around with Cudi, and Diddy wanted to take it out on Cudi. So it was at this time that Diddy called Capricorn Clark, who was his assistant, and said, hey, we're going to go get Cudi. And he went over to her house. He had a gun. Remember, she testified he had a gun. And he said, you're coming with me and you don't have any choice, or words to that effect. I just remember when it was testified to, I went, oh, okay. That's like one of the first times that the prosecution has scored points here, because I can see how that can be construed by a jury as Capricorn Clark not being given a choice. Diddy showing up, brandishing a gun and saying, you're coming with me, we're going to kill Cudi. That was the line that was testified to. We're going to kill Cudi. It says here they can still argue that the attempted kidnappings of Cassie and Capricorn Clark and the completed arson of Kid Cudi's vehicle are in fact RICO acts. So those charges, yes, they were dropped insofar as what was going to be needed to explain to the jury, but those charges still fall under RICO, which is an umbrella charge of racketeering and conspiracy. All right, we don't want to get into the weeds on all that because I quite frankly don't even understand it myself. We're just a bunch of novices here trying to comb through this. All right. It says the same thing applies to sex trafficking counts. The government is arguing that Diddy sex trafficked his victims, not that he aided and abetted others to do so. The prosecution is simplifying the charges for the jury. This doesn't really change anything. All right, so there you go. That's how the changes from yesterday actually play in when the rubber hits the road. So ignore all of those people that you may have saw on Twitter, Facebook, or wherever saying that the charges against Diddy were dropped. They were not. All right, Judge Subramanian then this morning kind of laid out to everybody how this was going to play out the next couple of days. Today, we were going to get Christy Slavic. We got Christy Slavic. She is the prosecutor. She is from the prosecution team. She's presenting the government's closing arguments. Don't know why she was chosen. She must be good at it. You know, these people, they all have their best things. She must be the most charming or the most, articulate. I don't know. They're all pretty articulate, I suppose. Tomorrow we get Mark Agnifilo. Mark Agnifilo is Diddy's lead defense attorney. He's going to give the defense closing arguments tomorrow morning starting about 8 a.m. That is going to be followed by the government, the prosecution's rebuttal to Mark Agnifilo's closing argument. Judge Subramanian said moving forward with deliberations, the jury will decide its own schedule. All right, so today we heard from Christy Slavic for the prosecution offering their closing arguments. Then tomorrow we get Mark Agnifilo offering the defense's closing arguments. And then after the defense's, then the prosecution gets to come out one more time and go, yeah, but he said, they get to counter that. And then it goes to the jury. Oh my God, we are so close. Monday, we're thinking. Monday. I don't think it's going to be a long deliberation. I mean, look, all you need to know moving forward is that the prosecution took 6 weeks and 34 witnesses to present their case. Prosecution spent 6 weeks, called 34 witnesses to present their case. The defense, well, they took less than 30 minutes to present their case, and they called nobody. They're like, no. We like the people you called. That's got to be humiliating to the prosecution, how when the defense is like, no, we're good. We like the people. You know, all those people that you called up to sit on the stand and essentially be weapons for your prosecution. Yeah, no, we like them. We like the way that all turned out. So we're good. That was the attitude of the defense. It's not looking good for old Maureen Comey and the gang. Let's see here. All right, so now let's get to the actual start of the show. Prosecution started their closing arguments. This was an incredibly difficult proposition for me today. I wasn't sure how I was going to cover this. I didn't know how I was going to be able to cover it. You know, closing arguments are performances. Closing arguments are you got a body language and facial expressions and cadence and tenor and tone. All of these things you need to see to really, the jury is getting 100%. We're getting about 20%. We're getting about 20% accurate closing argument vibe from this, because this is all on blogs, man. I'm just reading what other people reported about what they saw. Oh my, can we put cameras in courtrooms? These kinds of court cases would be so much bigger and so much more popular if we could all watch. Nobody gives a shit about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's divorce, but we cared because it was on TV and we could all watch it like a TV show, and we could all... Anyway, let's get started. All right, so Christy Slavic, the assistant United States attorney, she began her closing arguments. Let's see here, some quotes. She says, over the last several weeks, you've learned a lot about Sean Combs. He's the leader of a criminal enterprise. He doesn't take no for an answer. And now you know about the many crimes he's committed with members of his enterprise. All right, let's go over that. All right, you've learned a lot about him. Yeah, we have. I've learned a lot of stuff I didn't need to know about Diddy. It says here, he's the leader of a criminal enterprise. Well, you haven't. No, he's not. He's the leader. He's a hip-hop entrepreneur. All right. Criminal enterprise. What is he dealing arms to the Houthis? What are you talking about here? He's the leader of a criminal enterprise. He doesn't take no for an answer, she says. Well, we were treated to lots of testimony from people who told him no. People told him no. Jane told him no all the time. Cassie told him no. A number of his assistants have told him no. We know that KK, his chief of staff, who, by the way, makes $800,000 a year. Good work if you can get it. KK, making league minimum money for being Diddy's party planner, if you will. She told him no. I mean, people told Diddy no. People had agency within his universe. It says here, he doesn't take no for an answer, and now you know about the many crimes that he's committed. Slavic listed some of the alleged crimes Combs has committed, including kidnapping, arson, forced labor, and bribery, before turning to what she called the brutal crimes at the heart of this case, sex trafficking. Christie says, you heard all about how the defendant again and again forced, threatened, and manipulated Cassie and Jane to have sex with escorts for his own entertainment. Here's what I would say. We have heard all about how Diddy again and again manipulated Cassie and Jane to have sex with escorts. He's a manipulator. He's a little con man. He's a dude trying to get a chick to do sex stuff. I mean, what I don't think that he is, or that I've seen any evidence of, is the other stuff that she says here. He didn't force anybody. They all seem to be going along with it. He did not force anybody. At least I have not been shown evidence to make me convinced that Diddy was forcing Jane or Cassie into these freak-offs. I've seen examples, endless examples of them being okay with it. We've seen it in texts. Christy Slavic reminded the jury of what she called two shockingly similar incidents 8 years apart. The first, when Diddy Combs assaulted Cassie in March of 2016 at the Hotel Intercontinental. That's the tape that started this whole thing. And then the second, when he assaulted Jane in her home in June of 2024. Remember that one? That's the one that Jane started. Jane punched him in the face. Now I know that doesn't excuse whatever abuse that he did to her after that. I mean, he was being mean and he was yelling at her and she ran out of the house. Remember that story? She ran out of the house and then she came back. They were kind of calmed down, so they went out on the porch. And Jane punched Diddy in the face, like out of nowhere. And then the whole thing started up again. So I don't know, man. I don't know, Christy Slavic, the prosecutor. She reminded the jury of what she called these two shockingly similar incidents. The beating of Cassie at the Intercontinental and the fight between Jane and him at Jane's place. That was back in 2024. Yeah, man, those were two bad examples where, we seem to have no doubt that Diddy put his hands on a woman. Yeah. You're not charging him with that. I mean, unless we're just going to use that as circumstantial evidence to maybe prove a much larger and darker crime of sex trafficking. I don't know. I don't know if that ship's going to sail. Now with the jury, it doesn't sail with me. He was a dick. They should have left. They didn't leave. I came into this with an open mind. I was honestly hoping that this would be, Diddy's the worst. And we could have fun and we could make fun of Diddy. But unfortunately, I'm just seeing a prosecution that overcharged him. Said it from the beginning. She says that those two incidents, the Intercontinental and the beating of Jane, are not separate stories, but they're chapters in the same book. The story of Sean Combs, the criminal enterprise that he led. The enterprise, she says here, quote, serviced the defendant, Diddy. The enterprise serviced his every desire through a methodical pattern of violence, coercion, and manipulation. She said that the defendant, Diddy, counted on silence and shame to keep his crimes hidden. He thought that his fame, wealth, power put him above the law, but over the course of this trial, his crimes have been exposed, Slavic said. She said she'd expose or detail all of those things. Okay, spare me, Christy. You've had 6 weeks to go through all of this stuff. I'm sorry, I did not hear evidence of what you just presented. Slavic said the defendant, Diddy, was at the top of this enterprise. Remember, it's his kingdom. Everybody was there to serve him. Well, you sound jealous, Christy. I mean, anybody who is a titan of their industry is, emperor of their empire, king of their kingdom. You sound jealous. That's just how it is. Yeah, it sucks. People kiss the ass of celebrity bosses and, Elvis had, nothing but yes men. Michael Jackson had doctors that were giving him surgical medication every night at bedtime. This is just how it fucking is. And I just don't know that making Diddy the poster boy for celebrity excess is going to sail. Let's see here. All right, let's get into the counts. All right, let's start out with count one. We're going to do these throughout the course of today's show. Count one, Christy Slavic laid out the elements the government must prove for the jury to convict Combs on count one, which is racketeering conspiracy. First thing, she's got to convince the jury. She's telling the jury, she's like, here's what you got to believe in order to make this count fly. She looked at the jury. She said, you must believe that there was a conspiracy to participate with Combs in this enterprise. You must believe there was a conspiracy. There was a whole bunch of people working together going, hey, how can we get Diddy off? That's the conspiracy. Also, she says the Combs enterprise affected interstate or foreign commerce. Well, it's a very big and scary way of saying that, yeah, they flew to other states and bought hotel rooms and meals. I don't know. Did it to any larger extent? Did it affect interstate or foreign commerce? I'm not sure. Slavic also said that Diddy, the jury must believe that Diddy knowingly and willfully became a member of this conspiracy. Well, he seems to be the tip of the iceberg. So she also said that the defendant, Diddy, knowingly and willfully agreed that he or another member of the conspiracy would commit 2 racketeering crimes. 2 crimes. That's it. She's going to show you the 2 crimes that they committed. We know what the 2 crimes are. He had assistants buy him drugs and he hired prostitutes. Those are the crimes that they want him to go to jail. Those are the only 2 things that they can fucking prove. Okay. I guess, is that a criminal conspiracy if you get your assistant to buy you drugs? Is it still a conspiracy with the prostitution, though? Because we know that the hiring of the prostitutes was done by the woman who had sex with the prostitute Is that the same as using your enterprise, your assistant to go out and buy drugs? Is it the same having your girlfriend hire a prostitute so you guys can have a kinky sex? I don't think it is. I don't think it's the same thing. I think it's different. I think here's the slam dunk case, right? If you are using somebody hired through Diddy Worldwide, Diddy Enterprises, if you're using that person to go out and buy you drugs illegally, that, I suppose, could be a criminal conspiracy within your enterprise. It's not much of one. It's not like a grand embezzlement scheme or stock shorting or whatever. It's hey, get me some drugs. 22-year-old. I'm 50-something-year-old Diddy. I'm not in the party scene. 22-year-old, go get, well, he is in the party. Diddy is the party scene. What are we talking about? But you know what I mean. How many CEOs of big companies have gotten their 25-year-old assistants to buy them weed or whatever? I don't know. Probably, but not probably. I know for a fact that's common because I know a dude who, when he goes to Vegas, he gets Molly and Coke and he gets it from his secretary who's like 26. So, I mean, that's normal. Criminal conspiracy. Let's put him in jail for life. All right. So that's count one. Slavic said that when she talks about the enterprise, and this is another thing that is absurd now to be unveiling here with the closing argument. Slavic wants the jury to know, when I'm talking about the enterprise, I'm not talking about Bad Boy Entertainment. I'm talking about the world that Diddy has created for himself. Oh, fuck you. That's a little bit too much of a metaphor for me to put a guy in jail for. Are we talking about the actual company, Bad Boy Entertainment or Diddy Worldwide? Or are we just talking about this extended world that Diddy, this mixing of the two, Diddy's private party life and, the way that sort of connects to Diddy Enterprises? It's absurd. She's like, oh, and by the way, I may not be able to prove that Bad Boy Entertainment is directly linked to this, but when I talk about the Diddy Enterprise, I'm talking about Diddy, the existential figure. Oh, stop it. Stop it. You got nothing. You got nothing when you start saying stuff like that. Let's see. The Enterprise is Combs and his trusted inner circle, Slavic said, and it existed to serve his needs. Whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted it. Oh, stop it. All right, so he's Elvis. Great. Prosecutors, they kind of got back into the whole Kid Cudi thing, the car arson thing, and the kidnapping charges, and rightfully so, because these are two things that I think the jury will go, well, yeah, that happened. He definitely did that stuff. How they play into the overall charge, we'll see. Because again, remember, they're not pursuing direct charges of arson anymore. They're not pursuing that because they dropped it. They thought, you know what, that charge can be moved in with something else. Again, they dropped a bunch of charges yesterday in order to streamline instructions, very complicated instructions for the jury. Christy Slavic said that when Diddy kidnapped Capricorn Clark, remember, kidnapping is him going to his assistant's apartment with a gun and saying, let's go, we're going to kill Cudi. That's kidnapping. I mean, it's not, as a father, I'm the father of like a 6'2", 250-pound 16-year-old. He's gigantic. So I don't worry about this anymore. But as a father, when I was younger, when I worry about kidnapping, it's the white windowless creeper van that pulls up in front of the house and two guys in clown masks jump out and steal my kid. That's kidnapping to me. Kidnapping is not, demanding your assistant work overtime when you're in some kind of a rage. There are other problems with him demanding that Capricorn Clark, his assistant, come with him to go, as he says, kill Cudi. There are other problems with that. But I don't know, it's kidnapping. She could have just said, I fucking quit. What? What? You're coming with me. He only had that power over her because she was employed. At any moment, she could have gone, I quit. 5-year-olds playing in their front yard that get abducted by strangers don't have that option. They don't have the option when the stranger comes, hey, you're coming with me, kid. You want some candy? That the little 4-year-old can't go, I don't work for you anymore, so you can't kidnap me. See, it's not the same thing. It just doesn't. Doesn't work for me. Slavic reminded the jury of Capricorn Clark's testimony about that morning when Diddy showed up at her front door with a gun and told her, here's the quote we were looking for: "Get dressed. We're going to kill Cuddy." And then when she said, I can't, I don't, she kind of resisted a little. Diddy said, "I don't give a fuck what you want to do. Get dressed." All right, again, and that's where, as the assistant, she goes, "You know what, dude? Fuck off. I'm going to dental school. I don't need to work for you anymore." Never was it testified to that he drew the gun on her and forced her to come with him. No, he just had a gun because he's a crazy rapper. He's probably been up for like 3 days doing freak offs and Molly and all kinds of shit. Slavic reminded the jury of what Diddy said to Capricorn Clark: "Get dressed. We're going to kill Cuddy. And I don't give a fuck what you want to do. Go get dressed." They then drove to the rapper's house where Combs trespassed. Remember this whole situation? Diddy found out Cassie was with Cuddy. Cassie calls Cuddy. Cuddy's like, "Oh, fuck, I don't need this." Cuddy's like, "I'm getting out of here." Cuddy goes and checks into a hotel in Los Angeles. He then calls Cassie and says, "Why don't you come stay at the hotel with me?" So Cassie goes and stays at the hotel. So Diddy is raging. He's over at Capricorn Clark, his assistant's apartment. He's like, "I got a gun. Let's go kill him." They're at a hotel. Diddy's racing over to Cuddy's house. He gets to Cuddy's house. He goes in. He just goes in, trespassing. And remember, Capricorn Clark, the assistant, was waiting in the car outside of Cuddy's house while Diddy and his security were inside the house. That's when Cassie called Capricorn Clark. Remember, Cassie's in the hotel with Cuddy. Diddy is in Cuddy's house going, "Where you at, Cuddy?" And outside in a car in front is Diddy assistant Capricorn Clark, who has now received a call from Cassie. "Hi, Cassie. Hi, Capricorn. What's going on?" And Capricorn said, "I'm sitting outside Cuddy's house. Diddy's inside. He's going nuts." Remember this whole story? It's crazy. It was some of the most compelling testimony of the entire trial. Capricorn Clark, she was getting paid. She was on the clock. She was working. It was part of her job. Clark testified that she went to Ventura and, it says here, they drove to the rapper's house where Combs trespassed. Later that day, Combs wouldn't let Clark leave her job until she brought Ventura to him. Capricorn Clark then testified that she went to Ventura and convinced her to return to Combs' home. So Capricorn Clark went to the hotel where Cuddy and Cassie were staying, and she said, "Please, Cassie, just go back to Diddy. He wants to talk to you." And of course, because Diddy was way more powerful in the industry than Cuddy. Cuddy's a nothing. Diddy's a monster. Cassie was like, "All right, sorry, Cuddy, you can't do anything for my career. So I'm going to go back to Diddy because ultimately I don't want to be on the outs with him because the end game is, him making me a star." That's what it was. So of course, Cassie leaves Cuddy. Why the fuck did she leave Cuddy? Right? A normal person who was like, "He's a monster and my life is a horror show," because a normal person would be like, "Hey, Capricorn Clark, Diddy's assistant, I ain't going back with him anymore. He's acting like a maniac." But she didn't do that. Cassie went back. She went to Diddy's house. And then as Capricorn Clark testified, Diddy proceeded to beat the fuck out of her. Right there. Now, we don't got video of this because this wasn't at the Intercontinental. But this was what Capricorn Clark testified to. The enterprise's purpose was to protect its leader, not to protect Cassie, and certainly not to protect Capricorn, Slavic told the jury. She did go into a little bit more about the Cuddy case and how the Cuddy case, they're not pursuing that. Remember, they dropped it, the fire and all that stuff. Again, it still is circumstantial and plays into a much larger and heftier charge. So it's not going away and the jury can still consider it. But Christy Slavic did explain, what was going on with the Cuddy car thing. And here's what she said to the jury regarding Cuddy's car fire. Of course, Diddy was behind it. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that we're not suggesting that Diddy personally cut the hole in Cuddy's Porsche, Slavic said. You heard the audio notes. Diddy didn't even buy his own soup. which is funny because it's true. Because it's obvious that Diddy blew up Cuddy's car. We know this. Diddy didn't do it himself. Diddy didn't, as Christy Slavic says, he didn't cut the hole in the roof. He didn't prepare the Molotov cocktail. He didn't fuck up the use of the Molotov cocktail. Remember, it didn't work. It just caused like minor burns inside Cuddy's pores. And the cops got the plates. Okay, so look, we know he did it. And that's essentially what Slavic was saying to the jury. We know he did it. Unfortunately, there's no charge there anymore to directly. They just have to go, okay, he did it, and use that knowledge when they're considering other charges. She also talked about the attempted bribery of Izzy Flores. Remember Izzy? We all like Izzy. Izzy's one of the security guards. He's the first security guard that was approached by Sean Diddy Combs from the Intercontinental after he beat the snot out of Cassie. He offered Izzy a whole bunch of money for the video, and Izzy's like, nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm sorry. Izzy Flores, security guard at the Hotel Intercontinental, is a good person. In March of 2016, again, this is Slavic presenting, Christy Slavic, prosecutor, presenting her closing statement to the jury. In March of 2016, after Combs assaulted Cassie in an elevator lobby at the Intercontinental Hotel, Diddy tried to bribe the responding security officer with a stack of money. Israel Flores testified that he declined the money from Combs at the time when he responded to the scene and escorted Ventura out of the hotel room. So Izzy is the guy who showed up first on the scene. He's kind of scanning. He's checking out what's going on. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what's happening. And Diddy's like, yo, my man. And he like gives him like a big stack of money. And Izzy's like, no. And he escorted Cassie out of the room and into the lobby. And he did what a good human being is supposed to do in that situation. He didn't take the money. He's like, oh, man, I would have taken that money. Shut the fuck up. You're going to hell. Saying that, I might have taken the money too. I don't know. I am just so proud of Izzy for being a person who was like, oh, this is wrong. Good for Izzy. I'm sure his mom's happy. Christy Slavic also addressed sex trafficking, the sex trafficking allegations. Christy said, she told the jury that they can find that Sean Diddy Combs' enterprise helped him commit sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura and Jane. I don't know what that means. Why did I even make that note? I'm reading this note. I'm like, how does that pertain to anything? She also explained to the jury another thing that we all know, bad things. I don't know how this, bad things about Diddy. I don't know how this plays into the overall, but she went into the whole, about how Diddy uses promises and threats, and he does things to control people, like the paying of Jane's rent. He's still paying Jane's rent. She is looking at the jury. This is how absurd the prosecution's case is. She is looking at the jury, and she is telling them about what an awful person Diddy is and how he controls these women in his life to do exactly what he wants them to do. They're his slaves, and he controls them through things like rent. And she said, look at Jane. Yeah, look at Jane. Jane, who testified for like 6 days, still gets paid $10,000 a month from Diddy for her rent. Did you get the absurdity there? The prosecutor is trying to convince the jury that Diddy used things like paying Jane's rent to control her, to get her to do whatever the hell he wants. That's what she's trying to convince the jury of. Well, then why did Jane testify for 6 days? Why is Jane suing Diddy for $10 million in another unrelated civil court? If what the prosecution is saying, then Jane wouldn't be doing any of those things. She would just be collecting the money because the money is to keep her in line. It's absurd. And he would pay her rent to keep her from doing things like what? Like testifying against him, because she's been testifying for 6 days against him. It's just so flimsy, this entire prosecution's case. Nobody's saying Diddy's not a terrible person, but what we're saying is that he didn't break any real laws, at least not in the way that the prosecution is making it seem. All right, a couple of things quickly about what she has said regarding the different aspects of the inner circle in these charges and how they pertain to that. Regarding the criminal enterprise, okay? The overall criminal enterprise that he was overseeing. Slavic began her presentation by characterizing Combs as the leader of a criminal enterprise who, she alleges, committed several crimes, including kidnapping, arson, forced labor, bribery, and the brutal crime at the heart of this case, sex trafficking. Slavic said that the enterprise, quote, serviced Combs' personal desires through a pattern of violence, coercion, and manipulation. She also talked about his inner circle. With her inner circle, she addressed the jury. She said the so-called enterprise refers to Combs and his trusted inner circle. Slavic said that this circle existed to serve his needs, and what he said went. Members of the inner circle included his chief of staff, KK, Christina Karam, his security guards, and his assistants. Christy Slavic said these, quote, lieutenants were at Combs' side for some of the most violent and threatening acts. Okay. She addressed the two deliberate acts of racketeering that were covered in the trial. Christy Slavic explained that the jury must unanimously find that Combs knowingly and willfully agreed that he or another member of the conspiracy would commit two racketeering acts. Under the racketeering conspiracy count, these acts are buying drugs, buying drugs and setting up a hotel room for a sex party. These are the two acts that she believes form a conspiracy among, do you see how absurd this is? That's it. That's the big kidnapping is, of course, a big one. Kidnapping. So how did Christy Slavic address the charges of kidnapping? Slavic referred to Ventura's testimony about the time in 2009 when Diddy forced her to stay in a hotel for a week while her injuries healed after he physically assaulted her. Slavic said this is an example of kidnapping. She couldn't leave the hotel? All right, so Diddy beats up Cassie. Cassie has to stay out of the spotlight because he doesn't want, she's one of his young hot things that he's trying to turn into a big star. He doesn't want her going around with black guys and all that kind of stuff. So Diddy puts her up in what I'm certain is a 5-star hotel, some resort somewhere. And Christy Slavic is saying, this is kidnapping. Fuck you, kidnapping. Really? There are missing kids out there. This is not kidnapping. This is a girl putting up with an incredibly bad and abusive relationship because she thinks there's something in it for her at the end. She's staying at a 5-star resort, healing from bruises. She should be nowhere near him. Why did he beat her up? And then she's like, will you get me a hotel room? Why didn't she leave him? I keep going back to that. All right, drug distribution. It's another count. Drug distribution. What, because he threw parties and he provided the drugs for his friends at the party? That's not drug distribution. That's not Freeway Rick Ross, okay? That's not. It's Diddy, the host with the most. You come to a Diddy party, you want some blow? You're not going to have to pay for it, okay? Because Diddy's classy like that. Drug distribution. Slavik said the distribution of drugs was an essential part of each freak-off, Slavik said, adding that all of the evidence shows that getting drugs for the defendant, Diddy, was a group effort. Drugs for their freak-offs? The distribution of drugs was an essential part of each freak-off. The freak-offs we now know were a private event. Doing drugs at a private event is, illegal if the drugs are illegal in the state you're doing it in. But come on, Christy. And kidnapping. Slavik referred to Ventura's testimony about a time in 2009 when Combs forced her to stay in a hotel for a week. We talked about that. How about arson? Let's go through the arson charge. Referring to the torching of Kid Cudi's car, Christy Slavik told the jury that, of course, the defendant was behind this. She then talked about bribery. Slavik said, 2016, the incident at the Intercontinental. She reminded us of Israel, or Izzy. Is he the guy who wouldn't take the money? Izzy Flores, we like him. All right, so she went through all of that stuff. Here's what she says. She says in summing up all of the individual charges, she says the defendant's conduct has one purpose, to get Jane to agree to do hotel nights. And because the defendant knew exactly what he was doing, this was sex trafficking. All right, so on the sex trafficking charge, Christy Slavik, the prosecutor, is hanging everything on Jane. The defendant's conduct had one purpose. Diddy's actions had one purpose, right? Here's why Diddy did it, is what she's saying. To get Jane to agree to do hotel nights. And because Diddy knew exactly what he was doing, this was sex trafficking. To get Jane to agree to do hotel nights. Look, we have been over this. He didn't have to work that hard to get Jane to do hotel nights. She was down. She texted him multiple times. Oh, I love these. I'm so hot. Jane was the one that was having a relationship via text with Sly, the porn star escort that Diddy hired to have sex with them for free costs. Without Diddy's knowledge, Jane was reaching out to Sly and trying to get him to come visit her free of charge, which he wouldn't do. Remember, he said, well, it's Christmas and I'm going to stay home with my kids. It was like the 22nd of December. She wanted him to fly in to have sex with her for a day without Diddy knowing. Jane was not a victim of these freak-offs. Here's what Jane was mad about. Like, we know what Cassie was upset about. Cassie was upset about, one, her not being Christina Aguilera or Britney Spears or whatever it is that she wanted out of Diddy. Diddy was supposed to make her a superstar. So she was upset about that. When that didn't look like it was going to happen, then Cassie wanted another thing. She wanted to be the top woman in Diddy's life. And she was endlessly disappointed by that because we all know that the number one lady in Diddy's life was Kim Porter, the mother of his children. Kim Porter is now dead. She died tragically a couple of years ago. But when Cassie was in the relationship, that was important to her, that she be more important than Kim, and she never was. So that's why Cassie's mad. She didn't get to be a big pop star, and she never got to be the number one girl. That's the axe to grind that Cassie has, and those are the reasons that she stayed so long. She was attempting to achieve one of those two goals. Jane wanted to be Diddy's public girlfriend. We know this. Jane was just a sex freak for Diddy. Cassie was a legit girlfriend for Diddy, not Jane. Not Jane. Jane was just some banging hot Instagram chick that Diddy kept stashed in hotels. But Jane had convinced herself that she was more than that she was like his girlfriend. And I have not seen any evidence of that. I see a delusion in the way that Jane walked through the world thinking that she was more important than Diddy than she was. But as we've learned, while Jane was thinking that she was Diddy's main freak-off girl, there were other girls out there like Gina, who never testified because Gina went into the wind because Diddy's obviously paying Gina to not. I mean, if Diddy is paying Jane $10,000 a month for rent and Jane is testifying against him and suing him for, $10 million in a separate case, what must Gina be getting? Gina flew the coop as soon as this trial started. She was named as one of the witnesses. Nope. Diddy's people got to her. Paid her off. She's not that mad. All right, let's see here. The sex trafficking of Cassie, all right, not just Jane, but the sex trafficking of Cassie was addressed. This is count two. Count two, the sex trafficking of Cassie. It says here, Slavic said freak-offs became Ventura's job. It became her shame. Diddy plied Ventura with drugs, and eventually she became reliant on them. Not true. She is presenting that to the jury right now. That in no way lines up with anything that we heard. Remember, Cassie was the one who told him he didn't want to do drugs. And he was like, yeah, fine, whatever. And then even Jane, remember Jane tried to do the sober parties and Diddy was like, I'm fine with sober parties. So now you've got the prosecutor standing in front of the jury saying he made them do drugs and they had no choice. We know that's not true. Prosecution witnesses, not defense witnesses, prosecution witnesses lined up one after another, and none of them told us that they were forced to do drugs. They all wanted to. And when they didn't want to, they didn't do drugs. And they told Diddy, no, Diddy, I don't want to do drugs. Cassie told Diddy, I don't want to do drugs this time. And Diddy was like, oh, it's fine. Whatever. Want to be fun. It wasn't a problem. But here we are on prosecution closing statements. They're lying to the jury. Hopefully the jury was here just like I was. And the jury is like, that ain't true. They wasn't forced to do drugs, but whatever. Apparently the prosecution doesn't have to tell the truth in closing arguments. Slavic reminded the jury that Combs and Ventura met around 2007 when she was just 19 years old and just beginning her music career. When they began dating, Combs was her boss and controlled her career because she was signed to his label. He controlled her career, he controlled her appearance, and how she spent her time. Yeah, that's how the business works. If you are a 19-year-old girl and some dude who's in charge of a big-time record label like Diddy spots you and goes, I'm going to make you a star, the deal is this. Do you want to be a star? I'd love to be a star. All right, well, then you're going to do every fucking thing I say as your career manager. You're going to eat what I say you're going to eat. You're going to dress the way I say you're going to dress. And if in this moment, in this sort of situation, you decide that you're going to randomly apply the laws from outside the world business or the music business into this, yeah, that looks weird. If you found out that your next door neighbor, told his wife what she could wear, what she could say, how she could dress, you'd think that's fucking weird. But it's not weird in the entertainment business when everything is about brand and image. Cassie at 19 doesn't know what the fuck kind of brand or image for her is going to sell, but Diddy does. Diddy's like, okay, you're going to dress like a whore. You're going to act like this. You're going to say this in interviews. He knows what he's doing. Yeah, it looks bad. Looks bad when you're like, well, they're just normal people. They're not normal people. They're in the top flight A-list world of music and entertainment. A former assistant, Christy Slavic, the prosecutor, then reminded the jury of what assistant David James testified to about 4 weeks ago at this point. Former assistant David James testified that he heard Diddy tell his friend, this was back at the time that they first started dating. David James testified that he heard Diddy tell his friend that Cassie was moldable. Moldable. The quote here is from Diddy. This is what James testified he heard Diddy say about Cassie. I got her right where I want her. She's young. She's very moldable. The age difference, the power inequality, Cassie's naivety. Okay, this is Slavic. This is the prosecutor speaking now. Prosecutor says about the relationship between Diddy and Cassie. The age difference, the power inequality, Cassie's naivete. Those dynamics drove the defendant, Diddy. Those dynamics drove Diddy's relationship with Cassie. Combs threatened Ventura with freak-off tapes, she told the jury. Okay, so we'll address that secondly. Firstly, her saying to the jury, the age difference. Okay. How old is the judge's wife? I'd like to know. Hey, Judge Subramanian, what's the age difference between you and your wife? Let's go around the room. Let's see how many of you lawyers have wives who are 15, 20 years younger? But I get it. You're trying to present context to a jury. You want them to see this is a bad thing. The age difference, the power inequality. Okay, these happen in relationships. He's fucking Diddy. Who is he supposed to be in a relationship with where he's going to have power equality? I'm Diddy. This is my new girlfriend, Madonna. Who does he got to date that he could be on an equal par with? So that's silly. The age difference, the power inequality, and then this one. Cassie's naivete. Well, that's a her problem. That's a Cassie problem. That's not a Diddy problem. Naivete just means it's easy to take advantage of you. That's not Diddy's problem. He saw a naive young girl and he went, I can get what I want from her. Immorally bankrupt way of looking at things? Absolutely. But something that, we're putting people in jail for now? I don't think so. All right. Prosecutors begin going over the transportation for prostitution charge. These are charges 3 and 5. Interstate prostitution, that whole thing. Prosecutor Christy Slavic is now talking about counts 3 and 5. These are 2 counts of interstate transportation for prostitution in connection to the freak-offs and the hotel nights. These pertain to Cassie and Jane. She told the jury that to convict Combs of these counts, as she's speaking to the jury, you must find that Diddy knowingly transported a person in interstate and foreign commerce and that he intended that the person would engage in an act of prostitution. Combs paid for male escorts to travel for sexual encounters, often organizing other logistics with escorts. Slavic reminded the jury that Diddy paid for escorts to fly to New York, Miami, Los Angeles, and even out of the country in Ibiza for freak-offs with Cassie and Jane. All right, this is a problem. All right, this is a real problem for them. Now, this is also why the defense will probably hear this tomorrow. Will lean into 2 different lanes, okay? And here's what I'm talking about. What is the difference between a prostitute and a sex worker? I think we're going to hear this tomorrow. I think this is because look, they've got Diddy dead to rights on these. He hired male prostitutes to fly to other cities to have sex. Open and close. They got him. But I think the defense tomorrow is going to start to make an argument about sex workers versus prostitutes. Sex workers can legally exist. They can legally operate. I don't know what the difference is. Prostitutes cannot. So is that going to be an argument? Is that going to be something? Is that going to be something that he is going to try and get the jury to consider? Were these people prostitutes in the traditional sense of prostitutes, or are they sex workers? And is this even really a thing? I don't know. Legally, they're going to make it an argument tomorrow. You just watch. All right, let's see. What else do we have here? Prosecutors. All right, so the closing statement at the very end today, this is how she wrapped up. It's time to hold Diddy Combs accountable. Prosecutor Christy Slavic wrapped up her closing argument by thanking the jurors for their time over the past 7 weeks, saying they've seen lots of evidence. Lots of it was hard to hear and hard to see. She said, you heard how the defendant ran his criminal enterprise with total control and with the loyal assistance of his inner circle. His chief of staff, who was his right hand, and his security team, whose names changed over time. She then listed some of the key witnesses who testified at trial and recounted all of the messages, records, and images that the jury had seen. Quoting now here, All of this evidence paints a clear picture of how the defendant committed crime after crime for 2 decades, how he didn't take no for an answer. The evidence shows you how he and his inner circle committed crimes and how far they would go to cover them up. Up until today, the defendant was able to get away with these crimes because of his money, his power, his influence. That stops now. It is time to hold him accountable. And that's it. That's how it ended. That's how it ended today. Again, I wish I could have watched it. I wish I could have seen how passionate she was. All right, like, follow, subscribe. We've only got a couple of days here. Tomorrow, very excited, Mark Agnifilo, as promised earlier today by Judge Subramanian. Mark Agnifilo will be presenting the defense's closing argument tomorrow. Again, I don't know. The prosecution took all day. Is Mark Agnifilo going to take like an hour tomorrow? Is he going to be, or less than that? Is he going to be like, hey, jury, these people suck. Diddy's cool. Let's all go to lunch and have a good weekend, man. Is that what it's going to be? I don't think so. I don't know, but I don't know. I'm interested to mark my words. I think there's going to be some kind of debate tomorrow between what is a prostitute and what is a sex worker, because that's the only way that Diddy can survive that charge. If the jury goes, no, they were prostitutes, so therefore, technically, this is sex trafficking, they can get him on that. They can get him on that count. But if the jury goes, oh, well, that's Sly. He was a porn star. He wasn't an escort. Right? Sly's a porn star. Is it the same? Whatever. I don't want to have this argument. All right, folks, like, follow, subscribe. We are Radio Misfits. We do this every night. Tomorrow, we're going to get the defense. Then we got a nice weekend. And Judge Subramanian has done what he promised, those many weeks ago. He is going to get this to the jury before the 4th of July. My God, we made it. I can't believe it. Diddy or didn't he? Every night that the trial is in session there in New York City. I am Pugs Moran. We are Radio Misfits. We'll see you tomorrow with the defense's side of things. It's Diddy or didn't he with me, Pugs Moran, Radio Misfits.